Hello and welcome to Practical Creativity, which is an opportunity to talk with extraordinarily creative people and unpack just a little bit more about what creativity is, and so we can use it to make our lives and our work better. I am so thrilled to have one of my lifelong friends with me, Miss Lilia LaGesse. She is wonderful. She is extraordinary. She is very talented. And she also has been involved in creativity for as long as I can remember. So Lilia, over to you. Tell us just a little bit more about who you are and what you're up to right now.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me today, Marta. It's really a pleasure to join you on this. I've been following them for a while now, so it's great to be on. Who I am a designer as my background. I currently work at a creative agency called GRAPHEK, and my job there is as Senior Creative Strategist. So I do a lot of things. I work on our business development projects, project leads, a little bit of design work. As far as my background is concerned, I started in fine arts, but design was always loosely the vision. So I took a very circuitous creative route.
My favorite one.
Yes. Rarely linear, I found, in the creative field. So, yes. But yeah, I really enjoy design is the root and what really drew me to it. But now it's really expanded since I've gotten to go onto the strategy side at the agency.
Cool. So you went from kind of being a person doing the work to the person kind of driving the whole strategy and the kind of like bigger picture. So you're driving people who are doing the work. What was that transition like?
That transition, I think I was a little nervous about it, but my interest in driving the vision started actually at my previous job. I worked in-house as a designer at a nonprofit called Council of Independent Colleges, and I was pretty much the one-woman creative show there. And at a point when I couldn't pedal any faster, we started outsourcing work, and I was like, oh, I really enjoy facilitating this process, advocating for the design, because you understand what the work is that goes into producing a given piece. So after that, when I was looking at new opportunities, the graphic position was really exciting to me because I would get to do a little bit more and nurture another side from like doing the work to actually facilitating it. And it's been really exciting. I think there's definitely been moments where they're like growing pains and you realize you're like, okay, I'm not doing this, but how can I empower the designers? We're a growing agency. So one of the things I'm constantly asking myself from the very start when we're actually pitching proposals or projects is not only how can we help the client, but also what information do I need to glean from the client to help facilitate the designers too. So I really like working between those.
Excellent. And that's kind of like, I think probably what most people could relate to if they've seen it is like Mad Men. So you're kind of more in the Don Draper kind of seat there, working with the client and herding all the cats that have to do with the creative people on the
Never
ground.
Cats, though.
Never cats. Okay, no, I'm just teasing.
Our team's too talented for that, but no, definitely there's a little bit of herding involved, but it's fun. And I think so much, I mean, when you think of like what strategy is at its root, it's really creating a plan. So I view it not just as strategy for the client, but also helping plan what internal processes can we do or improve upon that will really result in a more creative, elevated product. Because we all win, the designers and our clients.
Amazing. And tell us just a little bit more. So you're working kind of like for people in the academic sphere, and now you're with an agency. So what are the clients like? What are the actual projects that your clients are coming to, GRAPHEK to do? Like, what are they? What outcomes are they seeking?
It's a wide variety. GRAPHEK works with a lot of associations. I think all of our designers are really motivated by designing for the greater good. For me personally, even when I was in-house at a nonprofit that was still advancing higher education, small liberal arts colleges to be exact. So now it's the opportunity for all of us to really work to see how we can help these associations who often don't have huge creative teams elevate their vision and really advance their cause, whether it's on an individual or an institutional membership type basis. So as far as projects are concerned, it's changed a little bit during quarantine, but we do a lot of branding work. We do everything from logo design, motion graphics, website design. So it's definitely a variety of full service agency, a lot of custom illustrations. All of our designers illustrate. So it's been great to really be amongst creatives after being the solo one-woman creative show.
Yeah. You have a team now. You've got people who you can work with and commiserate with
or vent about the font, right? Or something. Yeah.
So yeah, I love working in groups. But I think what's really neat about what you said is that you're in a position where you can really elevate the vision of the clients. And I think that is such an important thing. When you think about like an artist, and you said fine art is in your background. When I think about fine art, I think more about like the artist's vision, and it leads the audience. So what was that like to really, kind of switch your brain to be more client-centered, because design is like to solve a different kind of problem, right?
Yeah. I think for me, since design, loosely, I was one of those kids who figured out what they wanted to do at a very young age. So when I was back designing in PageMaker, so I'm dating myself a little bit there, but doing the middle school newsletter, I just thought this was great. We were using PageMaker, I was combining words and text and really seeing how when you do that in a thoughtful way, it's easily understood. So for me, that was always there, and I've always been cognizant. So I don't necessarily feel like having some parameters stifles me, because there's so much more that you can envision even within those parameters. One of the things we like to do as an agency is really think of, we call them like ideas to implement. So what are things that they might not have even thought of? I think sometimes, let's say when we're working with association clients, they might think, oh, we need a report. And like, once you delve a little bit deeper, it's like, well, it might not be just a report. Maybe there's a microsite that's a little bit more engaging, and you could reach a broader audience. So helping them think through those things. I feel like the world is still your oyster. I mean, you might have brand guidelines and those sorts of things, but there's still so much more you can do if you choose to view those parameters, not as like really strict walls, but as an opportunity to really try something new and help them think of things they might not have even thought of before.
That's so helpful. And I think that really resonates for me, because I'm also working with clients, and a lot of it is people who can like see in their mind's eye what the result is, but they don't necessarily know how to like map out the steps to getting there. And so there's a lot of that, what you're describing, which is like helping them go through the different solutions that they may not even be thinking of as possibilities. And that do elevate their vision. And
it's always a process, I view. I mean, because for us, I mean, we have a general sense of how we move clients through things, but we're always learning and honing, having discussions with our designers about how could we improve upon this process or learning. So every client brings something new to the table and helps you think about your own process in a different way. And I think now that we're all working remotely right now, we've really had to think through that process even more, because it's changed and shifted. So what does creativity or brainstorming look like when we're doing it remotely? How do we engage with the client and help them through the process if we can't, stand up and show and have a kickoff meeting where we're all jumping around a table?
Yeah, like whiteboarding and sticky notes. And
I love the sticky notes. Yes.
It's my favorite thing. It's like sticky notes are my spirit animal, even though they're inanimate objects. It's just like there's something beautiful about the colors and the possibilities, and the fact that they're not set in stone. I find a lot of peace in that. Tell us more. What do you think makes for a strong brand? We work with a lot of people who are creative, and they have the vision, but they don't really know how to create a story around it. And to me, a brand is a story told over time. But you're a designer. What does branding mean to you? And what do you think are the elements that go into making a strong brand?
I think a strong brand is really, it still is a story told over time. It's just a visual story. And I think that can be a sticking point with some, particularly in the association world, where we might not be marketing a product. It tends to be an event, or it's an association that might have a very broad or somewhat abstract mission. So perhaps they're really being intentional about how we're walking them through, like what graphic elements resonate. but also taking the time we really want to do the strategy and the research before we even get to that visualization phase to find out from the members as well as the key stakeholders within the organization, what is it that you want us to do? What are the pain points? Because oftentimes they have something, or I know oftentimes what we run into is they're like, but I have this logo, and they come to you, I need a new logo. And it's like, well, actually you need a whole brand story, because the logo is just, it's surrounded by the brand. We have a visual where we show them. So it's like the logo will just get you that far. So I think as far as a strong brand, it's really, tailoring that visual story to the mission of the organization and making sure that it's presented consistently and clearly. I think one of the things we realize is you could do something fabulous and gorgeous and beautiful, but like I mentioned earlier, if they don't necessarily have the creative staff to execute it, or if they don't necessarily have the tools, even if they have the staff, one of the things we're very cognizant about is like finding out, okay, who's going to be extending this brand? Who are going to be your brand ambassadors to help carry it? And what is it, are we creating it in a way that it can be extended? Because you could do something beautiful, but if it just sits on a desk and no one can really replicate or extend it, or it starts being used inconsistently, I think the more steps that we can do to help train them on the brand and to walk them through that process so they have an understanding of, okay, it's not just a logo, but also we're going to take you on this journey to create your story and then give you the tools to empower you to share it.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And it's great to have you just unpack that a little bit. One of the things that comes to mind is, especially in a time where there's an awakening of racial equity and obviously the pandemic, things are very different. So when we've been having these conversations over the last couple of weeks, something that continually comes up is that when you don't have normal things to hold on to, what do you have? You have your values. So when I think about a brand, also you're reminding me in what you're saying that like your values can be and are part of the way that you express yourself visually, creatively, and then also in the communications that you send out. It's all kind of like part of the same thing.
And it's that constant. I mean, usually when you have the brand guidelines, there's also part of the key messaging component of it too, so that you can return to that even though life might be a little bit in flux, things aren't happening as they usually do. We still have these core values as a company or an association that we can return to when we're trying to navigate uncertain times.
Cool. And how do you get into, like, what are the mechanics for you to actually get into that with clients? Like, how do you make the sausage, Lilia?
I think it starts, first individually, honestly, one of the things that I've really had to focus on or just make sure I'm being attuned to is like creativity within myself. Like I view myself as a designer, and unfortunately through the years, I've tried to create my home space as like a creative space so that, creativity isn't necessarily tied to something that I do elsewhere, but it's very much tied to who I am, regardless of where I am, and then using those tools, use what you've got where you're at.
Totally.
So once I've started with that, but also with a team and guiding them through it, I think a lot of what we do is really just the constant communication about where we are in the process. We have this great infographic that one of our designers created that shows them where we are in the process and making sure it's in the proposal we give to them, but we know not everyone gets to see that, but also sharing them constantly on our presentations. One of the things I've worked to do is it's not just phone calls or emails, but taking the time to put together the slides so they understand we're starting each meeting with, here's what we've done, and here's what we're trying to accomplish from this call, and then we'll close it with where we're going. So they always have a clear sense of like where they are at in our graphic story.
Amazing. That's so fun. It's like a visual agenda.
Exactly. Why not? If we can't tell the story visually, we're not doing our job as designers. Is my general thought.
And therefore you're living your values, which is super cool. Amazing. So tell us just a little bit more. We're talking creativity here. There are no right or wrong answers when it comes to creativity, but everyone has a little bit different idea of what creativity is. So what is creativity to you? What does that mean to you?
For me, it's really my lifeblood. I think it's always that sense of curiosity, the wanting to discover something new, to learn something new, to do something a new way. And also for me, a willingness to lean into the discomfort. I think that's something I really had to learn throughout my design career. Is in your early days, you're like, is the idea going to come? Like, and to really know what helps keep your juices flowing, what sustain you. Now for me personally, I know travel really sustained me and always is great for new ideas, but that's not really happening right now. So how can I travel in the mind, you know, or via Netflix? Thinking through that is really, like, I feel like that's what creativity is to me, is that willingness to sit in the discomfort and to explore and to be willing to not know and to ask questions to find out more, and then that will inform the idea that is the creative piece for me.
I think that's so beautiful. Also because creativity really isn't something that you can necessarily plan. You can set up the conditions for it. But leaning into the discomfort seems like a concept we're all getting familiar with.
Yes.
So what does that look like for you personally, either, you know, as a creative individual or just like as a human being? Because discomfort is like every day now, at least for, you know, for a lot of us, for most of us.
Yeah, there is that element of discomfort and at times isolation. But for me, I think, yeah, you're willing to be, I have to think, willing to be uncomfortable, but at the same time, knowing that the idea is that it's going to, I just have to trust that it's going to come. And some of those discomforting moments, as I mentioned, you know, I've spoken about the graphic story. Well, the nice thing about stories is they have a beginning, middle, and an end. So for me, part of the struggle with quarantining, I think, is not knowing the end. So really having to stay in the present moment and constantly, whether it's through meditation or just, you know, touching base, Post-its, as you said, reminders to yourself, to stay present. And in some ways, I think that's good because it's your world has condensed a little bit. So you really are more attuned. I find myself having more conversations with friends as well as colleagues about how they're navigating this process, because we're all in it together, even if we're separate. And thinking through, my brother, for instance, is also a creative, thinking through what is your process and how do we share it? Do you want to share it in the midst of this? I've had some really interesting conversations, actually. So I think even in the struggle, there's always that silver lining you can try and find.
For sure. And I think really, really good design is empathetic in a lot of ways. You're solving for people.
Yes.
But really, this is a moment, I think, that is awakening a lot of empathy, because we are in this together, and we're not sure that, like, discomfort is something that we all share. But yeah, meditation. So I'm also hearing, you know, sticky notes, inspiration, just staying positive. And, you know, what do you do to kind of like set up those conditions for creativity? Are you like a reader? Are you a yoga person? Like, does nature inspire you?
Nature inspires me and feels a little safer than other environments right now. I was a big museum goer, but also, I mean, I like to read and watch foreign films and documentaries. I think I'm just a very curious person by nature. So the opportunity to learn something more, I always get a little jazzed about. So that keeps my juices flowing. But I think one of the things I'm working on, and I've struggled with at times, is to keep that physical activity, because that always is good for clearing my head, but a little trickier to do at times.
Yeah.
So.
Why do you think creativity is important? I'm going to invite anybody who's watching right now, share with us your questions for Lilia. But yeah, like, anyway, go on more about creativity, Lilia.
How do I think creativity is important? I think creativity is important because it helps us envision new ways of doing things and new solutions. So particularly in these times when we find ourselves in uncertain situations where there's not a key answer, being able to think outside of the box. And as you had mentioned earlier, like the importance of empathy and put yourself in other people's shoes. I know one of the big conversations that's been going on in the design world in the midst of the Black Lives Matter revolution, I guess we can say at this point, but also even within quarantine, is like whether or not we're designing for someone, or can we design with them? And I think really that shift in preposition can really help you reframe how you're thinking about creativity, that it's not like, yeah, we could take you through a process, but I really want to learn more about who you are, what your goals are, and then how could I facilitate that, versus just like coming in with the answer. And I think an understanding of the creative process, like for one of the books I'm reading right now is the Book of Beautiful Questions, because I really, one of the things I'm trying to nurture is like, how can we ask more thoughtful questions to help people arrive at the solutions themselves? And we can facilitate it as designers, and we could help make it more beautiful and sophisticated perhaps, but the solutions, I think we all don't give ourselves enough credit that you often do have the answers if you can pause and take a moment to think about it in perhaps a new way. So.
That's lovely. The Book of Beautiful Questions. How did you land upon the Book of Beautiful Questions? That sounds absolutely amazing.
It's a wonderful book. I'm only about a third of the way through. But I think I found out about it on a webinar. One of the nice things I found about being in quarantine is that everyone's having so many webinars and there's such a wide variety. So it was a recommended book on when I listened to it. I just, especially as someone who's a strategist, who's really involved in the facilitation of the creative process, it's been really helpful for me to think through how I can do my job a little bit better and help ask the questions that can really get to the root of creative problem.
Amazing. And why is it important to get to the root of a creative problem in what you do? I mean, these things are like, you see them so clearly, but a lot of people have not been in that world. So I'm just trying to unpack a little bit so they can imagine that.
Getting to the root of the issue, it harkens back to what I mentioned earlier of really understanding what the problem is. It's not coming to like, oh, I just need the logo, but oh, I'm having trouble carrying out the brand across my staff. You know, we're outsourcing work and people are doing different things all across the board. It doesn't look unified. So once you hear that, you could say, okay, not only do I know you need a brand, but really to spend time for the brand guidelines and to think, oh, am I writing this for non-designers, let's say? So I'm going to use different language in that type of document than if I'm going to write a brand guidelines for something that's going to be extended by a designer who, like you said, speaks the same language. So it's like, I kind of know they know where I'm at with this, and there's perhaps a little less explanation, or I could be a little bit more technical versus I need to explain the file types and the different tools used and think through, can this be carried out on something like Canva versus InDesign, and really being mindful of that. So that's what I mean about getting to the root of the issue.
Amazing. I think that's so important. And oftentimes we're looking so much at the solutions. We don't really always have a thoughtful way of getting into what is really at the heart of this. Like even when you're coming up with core message points, like what do I want to say to people about what I do, or a client or whoever it is? You know, there is a deeper problem that you are solving through your work. Your work is the response to something deeper. So even having some tools, which are questions, as you aptly pointed out, to kind of go deeper into that and help other people kind of sink their teeth into it. We also have Liana and Jamie watching on Facebook. Feel free to chime in with your questions, ladies. Anything you want to know about design or design strategy, branding, building a team, or just the fun person that Lilia is. Lilia and I met in childhood. We were on the same ice skating team.
Yes.
And it was so fun. And that took us all sorts of exotic places.
A lot of Detroit suburbs, though, too.
A lot of Detroit suburbs, yes. And Milwaukee and et cetera. Okay, so that was fun because we were doing something together that you can't do alone, which is kind of, you know, one of the themes of what I love to do. And it takes bravery to do the moves that you do together.
Tiny blades.
Yeah, even back then. And I see Davey has a question here we'll get to in just a second, but I'd just love to hear about how, you know, being a competitive ice skater influenced your own creative journey.
Oh, man. I think skating was fabulous for me as a creative, not only because of just the dedication and the precision that it took, but that ability to work on a team. We were synchronized skaters, which means there are around 20 young ladies on the ice at the same time doing various formations and jumps and spins and things. So there was a lot of coordination required, and this idea of like building a program from the ground up every season. You would start anew, so you got into that generative creative process. But I also think just the nature of skating is a judged sport, and in design, oftentimes I think it really did prepare me for the critique process that you go through in art school, and then that's just a natural part of the client relations. So to understand that, yes, other people have their opinions. It doesn't necessarily define you. You're doing it because of your love for it. That really has served me well, and that's what I always remind when I'm speaking with younger designers. Is I think you never really know what experience is going to inform it. I think that's one of the exciting things about being a creative person, is that you can pull from so many different life experiences in this sector.
Sure.
So ice skating, who knew? And then since we both ended up in the arts in various fashions, it's been so nice to reconnect and see how I think we've both channeled that into our
for sure. And like you were saying, generative, you're producing all the time, you're repeating. And you're getting judged, you're getting comfortable with feedback. So Davy's question is, as a creative others' ideas, how do you bring yourself to your work? And do you feel that's even important or feasible? That's a great question. What do you think, Lil?
I think yes, that's a great question. How do I bring myself to my work? I think it's important. I think it's essential that you bring yourself to your work. One of the things I love about working, I think, with all of my jobs, but particularly at GRAPHEK, we're a majority minority staff. So people are bringing a variety of backgrounds to the table, and really, I think it really informs our creative process. And for me personally, since my background was in fine arts, a lot of my early work was spent, I think it's typical of your teens and 20s, exploring my own identity as a multiracial individual. Growing up, I know in our hometown, that wasn't terribly diverse, and figuring out where I fit in that and what my story is. So for me, spending that time doing a little bit of navel gazing and self-examination, creatively speaking, has really helped me, I think, take ownership of my ideas and my background, and really see how the diversity of growing up, I know, as you did too, in a college town that was really diverse, and being exposed to so many different ideas and wonderful teachers. And as a child, always being asked, what are your thoughts on this? And having to talk through it, that I think is so important, that you take ownership of that experience and really carry it forward into whatever position, because you're unique and you have a set of experiences that no one else does. So never be scared of your voice as far as sharing it in the creative process. So I think particularly in these times where we're really working to diversify the people who have a seat at the table and who are a part of the conversation, that it's even more important that you do that. So.
Great. And I'm just going to build on that and say, like we were talking about earlier about your brand, it really is about living your values. And if you don't bring your own values to your work, I find it impossible to do the work without like bringing my identity. So I'm relating to what you're talking about here. Liana has another question here. If you had to choose just one person to add to a team, building on your strategy here, Lilia, who would it be? Marketing, graphic designer, ad spend. This is maybe for a smaller organization, maybe a not-for-profit organization.
I mean, as the designer, I'm always a little biased. So I'm like, oh, another designer is fabulous. I think thinking through the background of the designer, like I said, I know at GRAPHEK we have different, some designers are data visualization specialists, so they bring a very unique mindset to approaching things. We have other people who are really well steeped and phenomenal illustrators. So I think one of the things I love about the design field, particularly at this moment in time, is that there's such breadth within what a designer is. So I would say a designer because they could wear lots of different hats and have a wide toolkit, generally speaking. So
cool. And I think it probably also has to do with, what are your needs? If you're looking to reach more people who will never know about you directly, or if it's, managing a huge volume of content that you need to put out visually online. It probably will change depending on
depending on where you're at in the life cycle of your association. I think one of the things I've realized over the course of my career, people are at different levels design-wise, and you really need to take a moment to see like what the pulse of this association is, because I can do something up here, but if that's not really what you need, and referring back to that question, perhaps they really do need someone who can like maybe manage their social media if that's their outreach, and they really need a targeted outreach, and they could perhaps hire an agency to do some Canva templates and those things, so that then they can push out their brand a little bit more consistently and then build their membership base that would then allow them to build their communications team and hire a designer. I mean, that might be a better solution for them. So I definitely
that's actually a solution I've heard a lot for smaller organizations, smaller businesses, is hire a designer to set up your brand and your look and feel, and make some like email headers and brand guidelines, but to give you the toolkit that will have the fonts that you're going to be using, and then just your Canva templates, so that when you're doing a PowerPoint, you just have something to work with. So therefore you're bringing in professionals who are, experienced in what you need, but then it's not like an ongoing retainer-based contract. So,
and I think that's also, I know it's an initial large outlay to do that brand work early, but I just feel like it is so useful in telling your story, and really makes you look very professional and more pulled together. And growth, I mean, ideally, it's a natural course of, building this vision that you have as an organization. So,
right.
And
really, when it comes down to it, design and marketing and branding and visualization, all your communications really are there to help support what you're already doing, whatever your purpose is, whether you're a small business owner or you run a multinational corporation. You are using the platforms that you have available to keep telling the story of what you do. And that will never be old to people, because they've got a lot going in their heads nowadays. So over communicating isn't necessarily a bad thing. And Liana says, thank you. We have some comments here. I'm not sure I understand some of them, so I'm gonna move on. But Lilia, do you have any thoughts about kind of like where creatively you think we as human beings are ready to go, or do you have hope right now for the world? Like, bring us home here on an uplifting note, something that's giving you hope or inspiring you, or that you're planning to do with your own creativity going forward.
I always choose to remain hopeful. There are moments where it's hard, and you might catch me on a rant or a little down, but at my core, I am an optimistic person. And I do think that this time is presenting us with not only new ways of working, but really engaging with the world and collaborating. I think at times it was like, I love being in person, but I think being able to think through ways that we can do this digitally has been really good for us, because now it's not necessarily that we're not going to get to go back to doing in-person meetings and one-on-one stuff, but we now all have in our arsenal that it's not the worst case scenario. It's just another option. So for me, I think we really are in a time of change. It's a bit scary, but I think we're really rethinking the types of conversations we want to have creatively, but just broader as a society. And I think we're coming up with new solutions to really solve some of the problems. So that I'm choosing to be optimistic about that. And I love that design's a part of the conversation to really presenting this new vision for the world.
For sure. I'm so grateful for that, and for that little bit of hope. I'm going to bring it back to something you said earlier also, which is maybe leaning into the discomfort is where the beauty and the solutions really are. And instead of being scared and like bracing ourselves for that, maybe that can be something that we joyfully choose to step into every day. Creativity is the great unknown, right?
It very much is. Yeah. I have a little sign actually behind me that says, lean into the discomfort. It's good for you, just to remind you myself. So
that's great. I'm going to get a sticky note and put it right on my laptop.
Always a sticky note.
Lean in because it's good for you. And that's where magic comes from.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you, Lilia. It's
Thank
always
you,
a
Mara.
pleasure to catch up and hear what you're up to. You are a bright light, and I think GRAPHEK is super lucky to have you. And thank you for being so generous with your ideas and yourself, and for taking time to speak with us today.
Thanks, Marta. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Stay creative.
All right, bye.